Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Keela Flores with IABC. Welcome to today's Solution Provider webinar, the Agile Internal Team Comms Team in the Age of COVID-19. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. Feel free to submit written questions anytime by using the Q&A or chat boxes. We will go over all questions at the end of the webinar. Our speakers today are Hani Khan and Susie Jablonski, and our solution provider is Simpler. Hani is the Content and Marketing Manager at Simpler. Susie is a modern-day cultural warrior. She has mastered the art of inspiring, engaging, informing, and motivating global workforces. With 20-plus years of corporate marketing, event management, public relations, and communication expertise, Susie knows how to bring out the best in people. As president of Jablonski Associates, she helps companies drive value through communication channels, events, and experiences that ultimately inspire and move people and businesses to new heights. Simpler is today's modern employee internet. Their software helps companies connect their workforce by streamlining internal communications and forging employee connections. They pride themselves on their stunning user experience. Their product's employee adoption rates are multiples higher than industry averages, and it integrates well with other world-class cloud-based technologies. And now I'd like to turn it over to Han.
Thank you, Keela and IABC, and thank you everyone for joining us today for this IABC webinar, the Agile Internal Comms Team in the Age of COVID-19 with communication expert Susie. Today's webinar, as Keela mentioned, is sponsored by Simpler, and I'm the Content Marketing Manager at Simpler, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. As most of us have been working remotely for the past 2 months and are uncertain of when we will return to the office, today's webinar will really address how internal communication teams have been put through a trial by fire in the last couple of months. Some internal comms teams were better prepared than others to handle the challenge. And just a quick, simpler plug before we begin, and I promise this is going to be the only sales slide that we're going to have today. Simpler is currently running a rapid deployment solution to help organizations connect with their workforce quickly. What that means is a guaranteed 2-week deployment, free accelerated onboarding, and a discounted implementation fee. So if you guys are interested and want to get more information, please check out simpler.com/RDS-2020. And before we get started, just some housekeeping items and a quick introduction. We're pleased to have Susie Jablonski, president of Jablonski Associates, reveal the top characteristics of agile and high-performing internal communications teams and what you can do to be better prepared for the new normal. We will be recording this webinar, and you should receive a follow-up email later this week, so don't worry if you miss anything. Really enjoy the presentation today. We will also have a Q&A at the end, so please make sure to submit any questions in the Q&A box as the presentation moves along. So again, thank you for joining Simpler today along with Susie for a wonderful presentation. Welcome, Susie.
Thank you, Hani. I appreciate it. And I'm delighted to be here with everyone today. And I'm calling in from Chicago. I would like to also thank the IABC team for offering just a wealth of information to their members and all the programming that they're doing to help support communicators. And I'm happy to play a role here today. So great work to them. And out of respect, I think before we get into the weeds about talking about how COVID-19 has impacted our lives, I do want to take a moment to thank those on the front lines, the essential workers around the globe who are working tirelessly since this started. And I know that we're all grateful for their continued service and dedication. So let's go ahead and jump in and get started. I think in these uncharted waters, we're going to find ourselves navigating the best way that we can and from our experiences and the best way that we know how. But as communicators, I think we need to find a way to cut through that noise to better connect with our employees. And to put that in perspective, I was scrolling through some social media and I found this really great quote that I think resonates with us as we talk about this today. And it noted, the author was not identified, but it notes, we are all in the same storm. We are not all in the same boat. And I think I'd like you just to think about that for a moment, because I think it's spot on. personally for what we're all going through right now. And then obviously for today, from a business perspective, all different types of companies, all different shapes and sizes, and every industry has been impacted and affected by this pandemic. We're seeing business models pivot. We're seeing them alter what their products offerings are. And then we're seeing people slowly adjust. And then we're also seeing other businesses just barely holding it together. And I think today our role as communicators has never been more important than right now. I am a huge advocate, if you've heard me speak before, I'm a huge advocate of communicators having a seat at the table where decisions are being made. Because I think as communicators, you are reflective of the health and well-being of the organization and the leadership. I think we also bring a really unique perspective because we recognize the fact that our fellow employees and colleagues are hurting. They're more stressed out than ever. Our dining room tables are now conference room tables. The walls of our personal and professional lives have completely converged. And quite frankly, I think we're better for it. I also would like to address and speak to the communicators here that have joined us today. And I want to do a big shout out to you. You are the folks also working around the clock behind the scenes. And so thank you for your thoughtful messages, for uploading, sending, sharing. We know that words matter, and we know that. So thank you. And while our job has always been to creatively include a sense of humanity and empathy and compassion, what I would really urge you to continue to do that with your leadership, because you can use that to your strength and you can use that to your advantage. Embrace it and push that forward. I'd also like to address communicators here on the call today. The fact that the responsibility of communicating to various audiences rests on our shoulders. We don't take that lightly, right? But we also have to recognize the noise and the interruptions that come with this. And I think more so than ever, we're just getting from all different types of media. Really, how do we break through that and ensure that we're getting messages to our employees? So I think we have to recognize the fact that, there we go, thank you. I think we're just gonna have to come to the realization, and I'm gonna really speak a lot towards intranets, because they're your virtual home base, your virtual hub where people have a great place to gather and get information. In my 2 decades of experience, I have found that the modern day intranet is really going to become a sign of a healthy culture and healthy business environment, because it's a place where everyone can get the same type of information that's needed to do their best work. And I think it's also important to recognize that this work from home isn't going to change as much. No one has a crystal ball, but different industries will be, looking at this from different viewpoints. I think it was really interesting. In the article I read just the other day, it was Fortune Magazine's Lee Clifford interviewed the CEO of Nationwide Insurance. And what he had to share was the fact that this working from home model is actually working for his company. And they've made the decision to make plans for 98% of their workforce, which is about 28,000 employees, to begin working from home permanently 5 days a week. Certainly they have some scenarios and some things that they'll have to plan out. But again, I think, wow, what ability to be agile and to pivot in this kind of environment. And think about that as a communicator in those shoes. What is it you're going to do to get people to continue to share information and connect? So I think that's pretty astounding. As you begin to think about the relationships that you have throughout your organization, the only way in which communicators can be agile is when you have information. And I am a big proponent that communications teams are at the heart of an organization. And I mean that by the fact that you support the rest of the organization, right? All facets of the organization. And as illustrated here, you can see the fact that, sure, we help with style and tone, we help with clarity and consistency, you know, working with access and security and speed and ownership and things of that nature. However, when you start to go and look at every single one of those business units, there's something that, this is your homework for today. I'm giving you an assignment here. Dive a little bit deeper, because given the fact that we're in the midst of this pandemic, you better believe that they're working differently, that their unique goals to their departments have changed, that they're communicating differently with their team members. Think about it from a trade show standpoint. If the calendar is, you know, nothing's happening this year, then what are the milestones for next year? And then what product launches have been postponed? And what does that calendar look like? And can everyone get back on the same page to think about, okay, we need to reset and reboot. How do we get that information? And so one of the things that I think, when you start to go and dive into those different business units and talk to those business leaders, you're going to find out a wealth of information that perhaps you weren't privy to, and I think will give you a heck of a lot of insight and allow you to be more agile in what information you share as a communicator. So there you go for your assignment on that one. Again, intranets to me are at the core and at the heart of organizations, because they're mobile, they're easily accessible. The technology that's out there today can allow you to begin to really start to understand how to connect that information. So if you think about, as you chart your path, and if you currently have an intranet or you're looking at, maybe this is a good place to start, I want you to think about this as you are the master at connecting dots, right? As a storefront, what information do you need to connect? In my earlier example of again, maybe a product launch, well, IT, sales, marketing, accounting, everyone's going to need to know where, you know, when and how and why. So how do you begin to share that information in a cohesive manner? And again, I look at intranets as that really home base to be able to share that. Also kind of turn your mindset to think more like a consumer, right? We're probably all doing more online shopping than ever before. And how do you go and search and find information? So think about that from an employee perspective. How are they finding the most current version of the employee handbook? How are they finding the most current version of certain policies and procedures, right? I think what's interesting is that employees are searching for information. So go ahead and show them and guide them and make it easier for them to find what they need when they need it. Because as you well know, employees are working all hours of the day, and some are working at 11 o'clock at night, and they need to find information when they need it. So think about that as you begin to, again, I say a master of connecting the dots. Having that mindset will really provide some real clarity when you're sharing information. One of the things that I love to share, and I have a lot of passion for employee-centric communication and intranets, and how I've been a part of actually for decades putting intranets together. I'd love to share this success story with you. And I'm just going to provide you with some context. The time frame literally was 90 days, if not a little bit less than that. I was given the opportunity to relaunch an intranet for a global company with nearly 18,000 employees, over 300 different locations, and uniquely had 15 different brands that were acquired through mergers and acquisitions. So all had different intranets, legacy systems, the whole gamut you can imagine. We had this huge opportunity to bring this organization under really kind of one umbrella and one virtual gathering place. And we had these real challenges. But the best thing was, and in my introduction, I think you heard a little bit of being a cultural warrior. I look at that because the roles in which I've played, you know, I really have paved some new, you know, paths. I've been a bit of a trailblazer and finding new ways of finding solutions. And what I loved is that I brought the, you know, different folks from different parts of the organization who were big thinkers, who were the squeaky wheels, who were the thought leaders, who were strategic, who, you know, it didn't matter, really titles don't matter. One of the folks who really had a really shared vision of what it was we wanted to share holistically, so we could get a big, you know, broad stroke across the company to make a difference. And, you know, I had a team, there's just two of us. I had one direct report, but I had an army of people across the organization, and they had great relationships. So that was really quite exciting. And the next slide can show you a little bit about what we ended up, the results really that showed there's no disruption to the organization. In fact, the IT team said it was the most seamless integration that they'd ever experienced. I think, again, with the scope of how many folks we had less than 10 phone calls to the support desk that day. We had tools that were super easy for people to use. I had one lady in the facilities team who really wasn't sure about this. She had to migrate a ton of data, and really she became one of our biggest champions. And we ended up launching with 85 different sites. All business units were go the day we went live. And, you know, we were also in lockstep with the IT team. They were really synonymous to part of our success because we ended up using a single sign-on security program that they wanted to launch, and we incorporated it with this, and it was a great success. So part of the success was also incorporating a number of different applications and creating one place for all those different collaborative and social media places. So we had things like Workday and Agencia and Octum and all these different pieces that were part of the launch. And it was a great, great success. So that's why I'm super passionate about that piece. And I'm really, you know, proud of that success and that team really. The next slide I'm going to tell you is and show you are the 3 T's that really coincide with any kind of agile team you're going to put in place. And the technology, the training, and the teamwork. And obviously you're all going to get a copy of these slides so you can go through it a little bit more. But really what that is all about is having the technology and the tools so you have autonomy to post when you need to move at the speed of business, to have the flexibility of being able to post a video, photos, link to other stories within your intranet. That flexibility to me didn't exist in any other kind of format I'd used before in building an intranet. And quite frankly, I certainly, it was impressive. It was a sprint. It was phenomenal. I think what's also important is the training. And what really brought a lot of folks along who had to migrate a huge amount of data found that it was really easy and much easier than they had anticipated. And we also had the opportunity to really kind of, again, put the lens on of like a consumer, the employee, how are they using information? How are they going about using tools? Do we have them in the right places? How are we connecting people? And I think, again, going back to speed and access and searchability, all those things are really critical to your success. And of course, I'm a huge proponent of teams. And that's just my mindset. You can't do anything on your own. And having a great group of people with a shared vision, who really want to get, to that big dream, that big idea, you have to have fellow kind of cultural warriors throughout your organization. And I think that's just a really healthy mindset. And also having folks who are going to poke holes at things too. And you have to think about and consider, okay, how else can we look at this situation? How can we continue to do our best work? But I really think that's important to consider. The other piece I think is interesting is providing the ability to empower employees, really to, dynamic and personalized content. And I think, what we're showing here is just, I wanted to share just a snapshot because I think this is important. When you allow your employee to be able to have the opportunity to control what they see, I think that's fantastic. They want to certainly have people on their team that they want to be able to, watch and see, other projects that are going on so they can have alerts. But certainly don't mistake the fact that there's the opportunity for file sharing platforms, collaboration platforms, alerts, and they still have access to all the company information that they need to see too. So know that I think that that's an important piece. And actually I'm going to ask Hani, did you want to add any other parts of the personalization piece?
Yeah, what we've noticed at Simpler is that consumers and employees are really looking for a personalized experience. They don't want every piece of content or information just thrown at them if it doesn't have anything to do with them. So what we've worked very, very closely with and on recently is making sure that all content that is shown to an employee on their platform makes sense that it's being shown to them. If I work in marketing, I don't know how much relevance something from maybe the engineering team has for me, and I don't want that to clutter my feed. So what we do really well is we work on making sure our feeds are personalized for every employee's needs and what they're really hoping to get and look for on their internet platform.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's really important, where they have control over what they're going to see, and you'll find that they're more engaged and that they'll search around a little bit more and try to find other things going on. So to me, that's a real win when they can have that kind of information and control. As the other piece that I know that we wanted to talk about, and I'd love to dive in a little bit more even, is on prioritizing and executing. And I know that we all as communicators live and breathe on priorities and deadlines, how they align with all types of messages that we need to get out. But I do want to share the fact that I think we are built and wired this way of anticipating and responding. And certainly while this pandemic is something we've never experienced before and we're getting information from all different angles, I think what the best that we can do right now is just to continue to anticipate what's next, how we're going to respond, and continue to create your communications plans around just that. I think we're all, again, wired to look for blind spots for our leaders, for our businesses, and I would encourage you to continue to think about that. And do you have relationships within your business and within your industry to be able to reach out to folks and say, hey, what are you seeing? Or what do you anticipate? And I'd reach out to fellow communicators and seeing what's on their mind, quite frankly, and other leaders, other associations in your industry. We have an opportunity right now to join webinars like this and to reach out and ask questions. So I encourage you to do just that. And I go back to this, and perhaps you heard me earlier say this, moving at the speed of business. And as communicators, we don't always have the luxury of time. And I certainly understand that sometimes you just have to pivot and go and do the best you can. And that is true. However, I think when we start to, again, plan ahead as much as possible, and in order for us to move quickly, then I think we have to just, again, look at those channels that work best for different business units, for different types of messages and things of that nature. I just think we're going to just need to continue to refine how we approach that. And in preparing for today, I started to think more and more about, you know, your ability to think about how you structure information, how you share, how these things fall. And I really feel that we're going to continue to see throughout the, throughout this pandemic, really kind of 4 buckets. That's kind of how my mind works, of thinking of things that are employee first, community focused, collaborative tools and resources, and strategic goals and objectives. And when I mean employee first, I mean that whole employee experience, that whole phased opening scenario approach, all those efforts, safety, security, mental health, well-being, benefits, all those types of things that you need to think about are going to continue to be a real focus and a key driver for you. From a community standpoint, I think of community first, and I think of a sense of belonging, of us not being able to perhaps be face-to-face or to be 6 feet away or whatever that looks like. I think a community is really one that is internally with your organization, it's within your industry, and then it's also in the communities in which you live and work and serve. And if there's an opportunity where you can do a virtual food drive and you're helping to support Feeding America, or you have different ways of having a buddy system, perhaps of checking in on a fellow colleague, I think there's really just has to be some real creative ways in thinking about how you connect with other employees and how we create that sense of community. So I think that's really important. And there's no better people than natural storytellers and connectors to help initiate those types of things. And next, I think the tools and resources, that really kind of goes without saying, you know, what's working, what isn't, what could you roll out, what's needed. Of course, I think Zoom has exploded. Of course, using that today. I think you need to think about what else you can provide to your organization and figure out how can we make life a little bit easier? What tools are working well? And how are we sharing that information collectively? The other idea here is thinking about safety trainings, any kind of certification, any other type of opportunity where you can continue to, perhaps employees have a little more time where they can start to think about any other certifications they can take. So I think those are things to consider, and you know your business better than anyone. So perhaps put a little star by that one. And then of course, here's strategic goals and objectives. You know, you have to think about the fact that quarterly earnings have all, adjusted obviously, but where is your leadership and how are you adjusting to new goals, new objectives, planning, meeting plan? Where are you on that? And how are you explaining it? Are you providing clarity around it? I think there's some real, critical thinking that has to go into how you share that information and how that's shared and how it's updated. So I certainly challenge you to think about, the best way of addressing those and looking also at 2021. I think you just have a real opportunity to work with your leadership teams and really refining those messages. Again, weaving back in a little bit of that, compassion and empathy and such, and how that works within your business. That's, I think, something pretty critical. The other piece that I think is really essential to talk about, the reason that I think you can be agile, again, is having information. And when you have the ability to look at analytics and slice it and dice it, right? We can certainly be creative in doing so. But when you have the opportunity to have insights like this, I think it's a huge lifesaver, quite frankly. I think you'll find it even more impressive when you have a search capability that is driven by by AI. It's smart, and it can also report back to you of content not found. What does that mean? So if someone's typing in Chicago reopen strategy, and they go and they do a search and it says content not found. Well, as a communicator, as an admin to an intranet, you can actually look at different types of analytics, including this, of going, oh my gosh, look, there's a pattern. People keep looking at Chicago reopen, Detroit reopen, Indianapolis reopen, and you start to see a pattern here and go, okay, maybe I should call the regional person and find out what that strategy is. And shocker, this may happen in other businesses that perhaps the train had already left the station, they have a strategy in place, they're gonna be rolling this out, but you weren't aware. And now if you've had that insight, you can now react to that information, find out what's happening, and be able to, again, connect those dots, share that information where it's necessary and needed, and also get in front of patterns that you're seeing, what people are looking for. It goes back to you being able to address those types of situations where people are looking for something that you're not providing. And I think that, to me, that's a home run in my book. The different types of analytics that I have found really helpful are your super users. Who is getting the most likes? Reaching out to them and using them as your big cheerleaders and finding out, hey, what do you like most? How is this working for you? And also they have a great following to also be some of your content creators. And I think, again, that's just a really smart way of using analytics to empower you to make better and smarter decisions. And the other types of analytics, I mean, there's a number of them, and you can really, really dissect this. What's the most popular page? Why? What are the most popular stories? And the other thing, what's really nice about this is you can share this information. And I really recommend, as a communicator, that you share this beyond just the four walls of your communications team. I recommend that you share the analysis with leadership and with your combined team. I think there's a little bit more of, if you are going to be fast and be able to move, you have to have information. And so to me, I think that those insights allow you to move faster. So when we were talking about, a little bit more about being agile, that to me is clear. You have to be in front of the information. You have to anticipate what's going to be happening, and you have to have a comms plan that allows you to execute. And so to me, I think those pieces will continue to allow you to be successful. And nobody really had a playbook prior to this, right? So we're all, again, trying to navigate through these waters. So I really want you to think about what are, back to those four really buckets. How are you going to be able to adjust and pivot and empower your leadership at all different parts of the organization that you support? I think there has never been a more critical time now to do and to prove why you need to have a seat at the table to help make those decisions. So I really, really hope that you take this advice and think about how that works in your specific industry, in your business. And I think you have an opportunity as, in your role to move your culture forward, to create, give folks the right tools, empower them. And I think whether or not it's in the midst of a pandemic or not, I think, again, you really can make a positive difference. And so with that, I would love to turn this over to Hani, who has a couple of slides to share, and then know that we'll go to some Q&A.
Thank you, Susie, for your very wonderful presentation and kind of really walking us through what internal comms means right now and sharing all of these wonderful strategies and tips as we navigate through communications during this time. Very quickly, before we move into the Q&A, I know we have some great questions that have come in. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to submit it through the Q&A feature. I just want to share how we've kind of seen some simpler customers transition to work from home during this time. We got a chance to speak with some of our very well-known, some of our power user customers to share their stories and how they're really navigating through this time. One of them being Splunk. The organization actually began transitioning to work from home back in January since they have offices in Asia. So they were really prepared when it came to shelter in place and when that got announced in the United States. So using their simpler intranet, Splunk was able to create a dedicated COVID-19 site that houses a communications archive, office status updates, and links to their FAQ and especially to their external communication platform. So they're really utilizing Zoom right now and their Slack channels. And they also provide external resources to wellness benefits because we're all struggling and we're all going through a lot during this time, and they recognize that for their employees. So they want to provide as much information as they can. They also really, really appreciate having a centralized, dedicated location for information because that's made it very easy for their employees to find information. They know where they have to go to, and they're not digging through their emails or through their Slack channels to find very important, pertinent information, and they have it on hand when it's ready. Another customer that we spoke to was Xilinx. Xilinx has a very, very unique story in the fact that they launched their simpler intranet in early March, right before shelter in place and right before this pandemic really, really kicked off. And they had to take that time right after kickoff to shift gears. They had to shift their strategy completely in the wake of COVID-19 and move their workforce to work remotely. They weren't working remotely at all, and they had to completely shift their whole company to a work from home situation. They also created a dedicated COVID-19 site to share updates about the company's response, contact information for resources, and tips from IT to help with the remote transition. And then what they also noticed, it was that the chief of staff to the CEO and the CEO themselves, they now send out weekly updates using the newsletter feature that Simpler has to keep employees updated and informed of the latest news, not only internally as to what's going on with company goals, how business is doing, but related to COVID as well. And they're going to utilize it when they start transitioning back to an office setting. And if you guys are curious about more customer stories, we have a lot of them available and how they're really engaging with their employees with their happy hours or any activities virtual activities that they're having. And they're all available on simpler.com/blog. And now we're gonna dive right into the Q&A. We have a lot of great questions that have come in. Again, if you have more questions, utilize the Q&A feature and Susie will get right to it. So, Susie, we've had a lot of really great questions. The first question that came in was, someone said, I work directly with my company's internal comms team, and information about how we transition back to traditional workplace is slow and hard to come by. What advice would you give to help us be more forthcoming with information as it pertains to our quote unquote new normal?
Right. Well, it's certainly a timely and thoughtful question. So thank you for that. I think you have to really go out and start to look at what CDC is offering. I recently saw a great article by Jones Lang LaSalle. A number of experts are coming out with what your checklist should be, how to plan. Again, I go to back to anticipate what this is going to look like, do some scenario planning, and this has to be a cohesive effort, right? It isn't just internal comms. You have to think of your facilities folks. You have to think of your human resources and legal, staying in compliance with what's mandatory and what expectations there are. So this is a really huge hurdle. A lot of organizations are going to continue to really navigate, and it isn't going to be perfect. But what you can do is create a plan, create some solutions and and what's your opportunity, and present it and start there. And I think a lot of times it's just hard to who's going to own it and how is it going to be communicated. I think if you really start to think about that, you can have a more holistic approach that addresses, as I mentioned, all those different pieces. So good luck to you on that. I think, everyone's thinking the same thing.
Someone else asked, if your organization does not have an intranet, what is the best way to send information? Our organization is large and has many audiences.
Right. Well, email fatigue is real. I think we're all experiencing that. I think, unfortunately, a lot of organizations, it depends how many deskless employees you have too. So I'm not really sure of your audiences, but it sounds like you perhaps have a various, audiences who are at a desk, deskless, remote, all types of things to consider. I think you have to go back and look at what's worked. And then I think you have to go ahead and approach and note that there are better tools out there. And it sounds like if you have a larger organization, to me, I'm a huge proponent of intranets. So you're asking the person who's all about, bringing a virtual gathering place, a hub, if you will, for people to get and share information. So I'm a huge intranet fan. And the great thing too is about having an intranet is that you can also see the analytics about how it's working, and you can be responsive. In email, you really don't always have those analytics of open, right? And even if they did, what was the action that was taken? So I know email is a have to. I just don't think that's the end all be all.
Someone else asked, how can we help employees have the same type of spontaneous connection / chats like we have in the office, for example, bumping into someone in the hallway and having a conversation?
Sure. Well, I think, again, we're a little bit wired to think creatively. So I think I'd reach out to what some of the business units are doing. And I've heard some really fun, creative things of bring your pet to the Zoom meeting. I think, we're just going to have to get used to having more virtual meetings, not being face-to-face right now, perhaps having a happy hour with different teams, and invite some of your senior leadership to join as well. I think people get a big kick out of that, to have the CEO join. I think there just has to be this ability to be a little bit just more human. And as I mentioned earlier, our work lives and our personal lives have completely converged, and it's okay. And so use that, again, get creative, and again, reach out to colleagues and folks in other industries and see what they're doing, because we have a lot to learn from one another.
Very valid. I'm a huge fan of bring your pet to Zoom. My cat pops into all my Zoom meetings every now and then. So.
That's funny.
Someone was asking, do you have a sense of length of communication? Pre-COVID, it was bite-sized chunks and stats, but it seems with health and safety and during COVID, substantive would be more thoughtful, no? Employees or consumers?
Right. Well, that's a really great question. And thank you for being in tune with the fact that, people absorb things in snippets. I think that we really have to understand what is it that the message is and who's the target audience and what is it we want them to take away. So if you start with that filter, some things still need to be a little bit soundbitey, while the phased approach of your safety and security of going back to your office should be pretty thorough, and also working with your graphic design team of perhaps it's a placemat and a welcome kit, or whatever that may look like. I certainly think that substantial information is necessary when it has to be really clear of what it is you want the person to do. I hope that makes sense. I mean, again, go back to what is it you want to achieve, what action do you want them to take, and what are the necessary follow-up. And do surveys, reach out to folks, ask what's on their mind too. And I'm sorry, Hani, if I can add one other thing, on intranets too, really some of the beauty of having two-way communication, the HR team had a real hesitancy is a mild way of putting it when we wanted to offer two-way communication on the benefit side. But what we found is, yes, sometimes you're gonna have people who overshare. But what turned out is that people were actually helping one another in solving questions and getting to the bottom of it kind of on themselves. You could see watch the conversations go, and it was really quite healthy. And I think right now we should really lean on the creativity of our of our employees.
Very true. Another question is, we have our regular communications. How do we balance that with crisis communications? Do we let the regular things go to focus on crisis, or do we need to keep some normalcy in place for employees?
Well, that's a great point. It depends how you're communicating. It sounds you have static general business updates, and then perhaps you have a different branded, maybe COVID-19, and maybe I would recommend that you have sort of branded these messages that are perhaps a little bit more urgent, and that way people, again, think about the email fatigue, think about it's a bit overwhelming right now for folks. So I would think about keeping those a bit separate at this point, because it could get really kind of, muddled down. And if those messages are urgent, you want those to be up front and center, and really just have them focus on what it is you need them to focus on.
Someone was asking about how do you create and have a functioning intranet without your IT team? Ours is more of a hindrance than a help at this moment, and I want to move forward.
Oh, for sure. Oh my gosh, I know exactly what you're talking about. Again, as I'd mentioned, for decades, I've been, creating intranets, and it was only until I worked with the Simpler team that I did not have to work, and I did not need to send help desk requests to upload a video. I no longer had to be tied and tethered to that team, because they were so customer focused, they were so externally focused, and internal comms was really kind of low on the totem pole, believe it or not. So to me, I feel for you, because I've been there, but there are tools and solutions and technology that's out there where you don't need to rely upon IT, because I go back to the speed of, the speed of business. You have to send out a press release. You're working with your external PR team, and that has to get posted, and, you can't wait. That has to get up immediately. And so you have to have tools that enable you to be autonomous, to be flexible, to be creative, to be able to upload videos, to be able to make, really visual storytelling opportunity. So yeah, I feel for you. I've been there, but I did have the ability to work with a simpler team, and it really, really changed my life, quite frankly, and for the better, the company I was working with.
That's the beauty of simpler, actually, is there's no IT dependency. If you work in internal comms, work in marketing, it works very, very well cross-functionally across departments. So you're not dependent on just IT to make the uploads for you. You're able to have different admins upload the content right away. You don't need to send it to someone else to have them upload. Someone was asking that they can't find the Simpler site. The Simpler is spelled SIMPPLR.com. So that's where you can find Simpler. Someone was asking, how do you get leadership buy-in to communication insights? Our leadership team often operates in silos and comms is an afterthought.
Well, that is true. And you're not alone. And I think that stick with it, because it sounds like you already have the mindset of knowing that that just doesn't work well and that's not healthy for the organization. When leadership works in a silo, then, they're not open to listening to the channels in which information needs to go through, pardon me, and how, and how that needs to be, the tone, the clarity of the messages, things of that nature. And perhaps there's an opportunity where you meet with them and just share, the expertise, and share with them what it is that you can do to help connect the dots, and show, provide an example of maybe something that a win that you had internally that you can show, hey, look, when we shared this, we were able to connect IT and marketing and sales, and, they were able to work better together, and here's why. I really think you have to have some real champions internally who get communications, who get why it matters. And that's not an easy one, but it is doable. And be strategic about it, manage up. The other thing too is what I've found is, again, that anticipate and respond. How do you make their lives and their jobs a little easier? How is it, what do you see in the forefront of your business and industry? How much do you understand the strategies and goals? And when you can start to show the fact that you understand the bigger picture, because at this time you're already supporting all the business units that it takes to run the business, then they'll understand that you have this more holistic view, and you have the talent and you have the expertise to help them manage. So good luck with that one. It is doable.
Another question that came in was, as a culture warrior, can you describe the symptoms of a healthy company culture? And what do you think will be the consequences of an unhealthy company culture and remote ways of working?
That's a really great question. So obviously healthy organizations are ones that are transparent, that have clear communication channels, that expectations are clearly defined. People understand the purpose. They understand why they exist. I would certainly share the fact that The Advantage is a great book to read by Patrick Lencioni. It's a really nice way of looking at how organizations can be healthy and what it takes. So that's a really great book to read. I think unhealthy organizations, I don't think those are, I think, there's symptoms in every organization, right? It's the politics, it's the, your culture is reflective of your lowest common denominator. What values and what characteristics are important? What does the organization put up with or not put up with? And are expectations clearly defined? I think in this new normal, again, I think you have to be really cognizant of just being human and having a central place for people to communicate and connect. Everyone, I think, still needs a sense of belonging and wants to feel that they're still part of something larger than themselves. I think there's an opportunity, again, to, diagnose your business operations today and reflect on it and think about what it is that, from a communications perspective, how is it you can impact it and make it better.
Susie, can you repeat the name of the book? Someone was asking about it.
Sure. It's called The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni.
All right. Another question that someone asked was, what is the biggest mistake you see people making when it comes to internal comms?
Well, the biggest mistake, well, there may be a few. I think one is not getting a seat at the table and not asking, enough questions. I think as an internal comms person, again, you have the ability to get insights from every single part of the business, and you have that responsibility to be able to articulate and really cultivate this culture, this dynamic culture of yours. So being apprehensive or allowing someone else, to share the narrative, I think internal comms folks just have to be a little, just have to be more forward. I think communications teams should be a standalone division and not report up through any other type of business unit, because you find, I love my HR friends, but they're so focused on, benefits and particulars that are, legal and other pieces that don't necessarily fit to the entire employee experience. And then through Marcom, I found that they're so externally focused that, you're not always the priority. So I would just really dig your heels in if you really want to play an active role. And you can do this. You can do this in a really respectful way. But get out there and learn and listen and ask questions and be present. And again, extend your reach with relationships, because I think if anything, that to me is your, it's a real asset.
Mm-hmm. Someone earlier asked, based off of something that I had said about, do you have any tips on how to help various parts of the organization, that not everyone needs to know everything that is happening with every department when setting up intranet feeds? To use your example, folks in marketing aren't interested in engineering, but the people in engineering really want everyone to know about their project for awareness. Just quickly to touch upon that, Simpler has sites that people can build out. So for us, we have various different department sites built out. So when engineering has something that they want to share, they share it to the all company feed, knowing that that's something that everyone should know about or bring awareness to. But when it's smaller things about projects that they're working on or something that's more focused internally on that department, they focus it on their site. But anything that they need the whole company to know about, they post it in the all company site. Another question that someone had was, how do we get our leadership to view comms as an integral part of business rather than an afterthought, even during the crisis?
Right. Well, again, you have to again, anticipate what it is that, again, their needs. How do you make their jobs easier? How is it that you can become more of an integral part of the decision-making process and be there? You have to be able to show that you are a critical component of sharing the message and being able to show how it's working. I mean, you can work on a really great video, you can work on a really great, documents and edit and re-edit and all that great stuff. But if you share it and no one's paying attention to it, you can have the analytics to go back and say, hey, look, I think we can find a better way of sharing these updates. And here's what we can do. Again, I go back to IABC and the wealth of programming that they're offering too for communicators. You really have to establish yourself as an expert and use your experience and expertise and position it. That's really what that is. Find a champion who can help. Again, it's possible. Easier said than done, I know, but stick with it because I think you'll find the advantages are well worth it.
Yeah. And with that, we have a lot more questions to go through, but unfortunately we're at the top of the hour. Susie's information is available on screen. Please feel free to take a screenshot. Again, the presentation will be sent out later this week, so this will be provided to you as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact her directly. And to get in touch with Simpler, our website again is simpler.com. And for our rapid deployment solution, it's simpler.com/RDS-2020. Thank you again so much, everyone, for joining us today. Really appreciate it. And thank you, Susie, for joining and answering all of these wonderful questions.
Sure.
And everyone, have a great day.